Well, it looks a little different this week in the smoke-filled room. That's because we're doing our best to make some changes that you have requested. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback on our podcast. Thank you for that. We've also gotten constructive criticism, and one of the things we've been nervous about that some of you have shared is that these episodes have gotten too long. Obviously, the 100th episode was crazy long, but that was by design. Even other than that, though, some of these other episodes have been creeping well above 90 minutes. So we're going to try something for the month of May. Every other week, we'll have special guests on, like we have this week. And then the other weeks, it'll be me, Michael, and Chris in a more laid back setting. And hopefully, with fewer people to speak on every topic, we won't need as much time. So we're going to give it a try. We'll see what happens. I know Chris is real bummed he's not on this week because he wants to talk about the new Pope being from the South Side as a proud South Sider. He wants to talk about the Kristi Noem visit. And poor Chris just has to watch this and listen to all the rest of us give our thoughts. So maybe that's worth it all by itself. But we've got a lot of media topics to get into, so let me introduce our guests for this week, and we'll get rolling. We have with us returning guest Craig Wilcox. He's the state senator from the 32nd District, previously served on the McHenry County Board. He also served our country in the military and is a small business owner. So, Craig, we're glad to catch you, especially when what's a really busy time down in Springfield.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be on. Welcome to Animal House here in Springfield. So I get to enjoy a cigar with Collin for the first time. And just lucky that tomorrow got canceled and we finished relatively early today. So thanks for having me on.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing from the belly of the beast exactly what's going on down there in Springfield. So that'll be great. We also have with us returning Carolyn Schofield. She's a McHenry County representative and a vice chair on the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning Board. She's on the McHenry County Mental Health Board and is a state policy legislative expert. So also timely that we've got you, Carolyn. Good to have you.
Great to be back. Thanks.
And with us coming again is Corey Allen, who isn't overly special. So I guess you're the one I get to tease this week. Nah, I'm teasing. He's the vice chairman of the Tazewell County Republican Party and also a veteran of the U.S. Navy. So, Corey, thanks for your service and thanks for being here.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to be in the smoke-filled room. So, looking forward to making some hay today.
That's the one thing I don't know about this new setup. Without Chris to make fun of, I'm going to sort of struggle. So, Corey, maybe you'll be my victim for the week.
Works for me. I come from the Navy. We're given thick skin in boot camp, so we're good to go.
Excellent. Well, then we are going to roll this week.
Yes, sir.
All right, we got to start with this. So, Kristi Noem, Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, was in Springfield this week, and I'm sure y'all have heard about it because everybody has had an opinion on it. It's no surprise, I'm sure, that I've got about 36 opinions, but I'm going to shut up and let you guys give your initial thoughts first, and then we'll really dive into it. So anyone who'd like, jump on in with your thoughts.
So since I'm down here, it is an event that I would have attended had I not had two committee hearings, one in which I'm the minority spokesperson. So I was not out there. But certainly Republicans that were there to support the implementation of policy that says, look, if you're in this country illegally and you are committing crimes, you should not be being released early from jail. You should not be getting electronic monitoring. You should be getting arrested and deported. And in this case, that's what she was talking about. She had angel families there to talk about those they've lost at the hands of illegal immigrants. And unfortunately, the story now maybe is more about something else that occurred or the location, but this is the policy that should be front and center, that in my view, everyone should be able to get behind. If we have individuals in our communities that are causing harm, that are committing crime, they just don't need to be in our community. And it's amazing who is out there supporting the opposition to this simple policy, common sense policy. But it's being enacted by Orange Man, so it must be bad.
Well, and Craig, there's a few things there I'll want to dive into, but I just want to start with one of the first things you said, which is you would have been there. There are some people like Tom DeVore and others who are trying to raise hay and say, look, see, the Republicans are a bunch of rhinos. Of course, not understanding how Springfield works, this was in the middle of the busiest time in session, and most of y'all were in committees and were busy. So let's make that clear here, that while there was solid representation from all different factions of our party, there were some people who strategically cropped some photos to make it look like they weren't there, and then a lot of you were stuck in committee and couldn't make it. So let's just make that clear. We can do away with the infighting and focus on the task at hand. Who else has thoughts?
I'll jump in and agree with Craig. I mean, everything he said, I watched that press conference and I I thought it was completely benign politically. It was just at issues that everyone should be concerned with, as far as crime and crime being committed, in our neighborhoods. So I was surprised by all the kind of backlash, but I guess they'll, take anything anyone says and turn it and twist it. So that was a little disappointing because I thought it was the core message really should resonate with everybody.
Well, and Carolyn, isn't it always funny how every time it's not, from the left, the response is they hate immigrants. It's like the whole press conference was about illegal immigrants, but you've just bunched it all together and said all immigrants. That's always what they do to us on any immigration related issue. But they've gotten more and more overt with it. They don't even hide it anymore, and they're allowed to get away with it.
Well, and that's what they do, is that they're allowed to get away with it, especially in Illinois, because they have the soapbox, the echo chamber. They can do anything and everything that they want, and we're sitting here with the infighting that we have, trying to defend common sense policy, whether they're legal or illegal, doesn't matter. Crime needs to be eradicated, period. And that's something that the left, especially under J.B. Pritzker, with his announcement to the call to arms for them, I think, the implementation of policy, like Senator Wilcox said, like having boots on the ground, having our president send his team to our area to show that they're about business. We need to be capitalizing on that on our side, because if the left is going to push out that it was the location that was the issue they had, is that she wouldn't show up to the governor's mansion. Well, it's because we don't want to deal with people who are petulant children, except we're doing that on our side as well. And so I think it's a great talking point for us to say, are you about this or are you not about this? Because if you want to see the change, here is that change. So I don't know. I think it's awesome that they were here. We need pushback in Illinois, and so more power to us, I guess.
Well, and it seems like there was a number of groups that were involved with making this happen. Obviously, the Freedom Caucus was all over this, and I know Rep. Cabello was very helpful and involved in it. I know the Senate Republicans, Craig. I mean, your caucus has been leading the charge for months now, frankly, over a year at this point, on tax dollars that are being spent on non-citizens versus being spent on our citizens, and then obviously that dovetails into sort of the immigration issue. So there's been a lot of groups that have sort of push this from different angles, and that's a solid talking point for us. I mean, immigration is an issue on which Republicans are winning, and it's one of the few at the moment because we've got some struggles. And pushing that in theory sounds really good. I'll get into the negatives later. I don't want to, I'll balance this out here. But from the positive side, there is a solid, strong message here on which the majority of Americans agree, as we've covered on this podcast a number of times, that a significant majority of Americans, including Democrats, agree that those who are here not only illegally but also committing crimes, especially violent crimes, need to go. This is solid ground that we're on when it comes to the electorate in Illinois and across the country. So the more we can bring the focus here, the better off we're going to be.
So before we leave the topic, though, you can have all of the views that we just had, and you can have empathy for Emma Schaefer's family. All right. I'll acknowledge the location choice, result of the protests at the governor's mansion, but don't forget that Emma was well liked here in Springfield. And so the ire is up a little bit heightened because of this. But the reality is she was fighting for immigrants, legal and illegal. And unfortunately, her demise came at the hand of someone illegal. And that still isn't enough to bring the left to acknowledge that illegal criminals need to be deported. And so you can have empathy for the situation and still want to adhere to good public policy.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the location next, but I had the same note you did because I read some of the comments about Miss Schaefer and the unfortunate loss of life that happened. And I'll read it. Someone said she dedicated her life, her career, and her free time to causes of social justice and equity. She built up the community and stood with all members, including immigrants. I mean, the reality is one that you said, Craig, which is this is somebody who dedicated her life to a cause that she believed in. And in some respects, that cause partially cost her life. The question is, do you then rethink that cause a little bit? Is it maybe, we are a welcoming society and we should be a welcoming society, but some people who are here and don't respect the fact that it's a privilege to be here, maybe they shouldn't be here. I mean, that's, some introspection is maybe warranted, but as you said, Craig, it's all about, sort of the outrage because Orange Man bad. But, I would have a little bit of a balance there of, yes, this was a horrible loss of life. Why did it happen? And should we be doing something differently? And if we had, would this young woman still be with us?
I think it's a flashpoint because one of the main arguments that the left has about this is that if you're here in this country, you deserve due process, but due process is only due for people who are here legally. And that's one of the issues that I have with a lot of this. The empathy thing being they're coming from law enforcement. A lot of times you're finding people at their worst moments. So being able to navigate through this, we need to show on our side of this argument that we're here and we do have feelings. A lot of times we get um, pushed by the left to retort to these just extreme responses. I think something like this that's very subtle in a way, of course, because of her position, it's going to look a lot more of a flashpoint. But Republicans do this very well, is that we show up for people who need help. What we need to do is make sure that we're taking this unfortunate situation and using it to curb any of that moving forward. And that's where coming from the legality of, we're just going to catch criminals and let them go and they're illegal. That's where having Kristi Noem come here and say, no, we're not doing this anymore. Because we got to push back. We got to find out how to play not nice, but still be empathetic to the people who are getting screwed by the policies of the left.
Yeah, I mean, Corey, obviously you've seen, I give a whole class on how Republicans need to do better about caring and talking about how we do care. So I certainly agree. And then I also sort of get frustrated because, the left has a monopoly on caring. And yet I think it was Chesney, but it might have been somebody else who posted a video of what some of the protesters were screaming at them. And it was obscenities and it was ridiculous and it was go home. And it was all the BS that, they claim Republicans say, and they were the ones screaming it and saying it. And it's, we always get dinged for, oh, Republicans don't care, but we're not the ones, burning things down because there's a policy we don't agree with. We're not the ones who hear you're coming for a press conference. So we go bring drums and noisemakers and
Right.
scream obscenities so you can't have a press conference. I mean, to say that we're the ones who don't care, the modern Democratic Party, the modern progressive movement is the epitome of not caring,
Correct.
and they seem to get away with it, and that frustrates me.
Well, I think that's a perfect example of that press conference that it focused specifically on criminal activity that had been displayed here. Like it didn't get into just any undocumented individual. It was specific to those committing crimes. And so, the fact that they lumped it all together, as you said, Collin, and completely, dismissed or lost focus of, we're talking about people that have conducted violent crimes here. And to ignore that fact and just say that it was wrong to have that conversation, I think it flips the cards on that one, that we're showing the ones that we actually have that empathy towards those families, and they're dismissing that. And that's what I got out of it.
And let's talk about that, Carolyn, because we often talk about politics, and I've said for years, one of our biggest problems, especially, I mean, as Republicans in general, I see this in multiple states that I do work in, but we tend to be extra bad at it here in Illinois, is we come up with good ideas, but then how we do it tends to mitigate how good of an idea it was. We had an episode just recently, it might have been last week, or I don't even remember anymore because I don't know, my 1-year-old doesn't let me sleep, but we said good ideas done in the stupidest possible way. And while this wasn't the stupidest possible way, there were some key errors made. And I bring them up only because part of the point of this podcast is to help all of us learn and grow. And so I do want to spend a couple minutes talking about some of the things that could have been done better, not to nitpick, but I do think for all of us, it's instructive to learn just why did this thing in some ways go off the rails? Why is it that we allowed our opposition an opening on an issue that frankly the public is not with them on? How did that happen? Because sometimes in our tactics, we do need to get better. So let's talk about that. First was just venues. So the fact when it was announced that this was going to be in front of the governor's mansion, my first thought was, you just set yourself up for failure. I mean, you do this in a situation, you do this in a place that you control, not out in front of the governor's mansion, a place that your opponents control. Because as you saw, they could put up banners, they can bus people in. I mean, I'm shocked they didn't have people on the lawn behind already ready to go with all their posters and everything. They had them behind the camera, which I thought was a mistake by the Democrats. But you went to their territory and said, hey guys, here's some advance notice that we're going to be standing, in an area you control, please don't be mean to us. Please don't cause problems. That ain't going to work. This is war, guys. And they were never, ever going to let that pitch go by.
You just said it, and it's not literal war. With all due respect to our men and women who are actually in a war zone, this is not that. But we have to take that approach. That is the first thing, that you learn in strategy is that you don't give away the element of surprise and you don't give away the high ground. Well, we had the moral high ground, and then we just gave them the target and walked right in front of their people with the backdrop. That's what went off the rails with this, is that the strategy that gets thrown together in this, it's born out of a boardroom. That doesn't work on the streets. That when the Democrats have control of all of the angles of attack, you have to think differently. And there's a reason why we have multiple branches in our military. It's because each one has its own little specialty that it does, and we don't do that well in Illinois. The five corners of Illinois, we don't talk to each other. How many people can talk up north and talk south and not get booed out of one of those two rooms? And so I think it's a strategic error, not born out of intentionality, but just, we don't have strategic thinkers that are thinking that far ahead with that type of stuff. Because again, politics by nature is right here, right now. How do we drum up the most amount of noise? And I think we have to go that other way and figure out what that tactic is so we deliver that empathy the right way.
Well, we're in a party right now that seems to have a significant dislike for experience because Trump got elected president twice and he came into this as a political amateur. It sort of emboldens everyone else to say, look, see, you don't need experience. And I think the youth and energy and excitement that comes to our party with new people is 100% necessary, but
Amen.
Also necessary is experience. And some of the most important people in any field program or apparatus are your advanced staff, your advanced team. And we've seen this problem a lot with some of the things that come out of the Trump administration, where it's just, hey, I wake up one morning with a brilliant idea. There's a reason why advanced staff are paid and are important in the process. They're going to vet anybody that you're going to put up on camera. They're going to vet your locations and make sure that you're not going to lead to problems. If you don't do that due diligence, you find yourself in situations like this, where the venue choice was a backup choice. It was not their initial choice, but I or anyone else with more than 5 minutes of experience could have told them that they were never going to end up being able to do this in front of the governor's mansion. You were going to have to be at your backup choice. And so rushing over to your backup choice, which ended up being a tactical mistake, which we'll talk about next, an advanced team would have told them that, listen, this is exactly what's going to happen. We should be prepared for it. And it seems like tactically that was missed. So for those who are, if you're running statewide or running congressional and you're going to have press coverage and you're going to have situations like this, have at least one advanced person, if not multiple, because you got to vet anyone you're going to put on camera. You got to vet anywhere you're going to be, because if you give your opponent this kind of an opening, what ends up happening is that's the story instead of what you wanted to make the story. And so just as constructive advice for our Republicans as we go into 2026, you can avoid situations like this if you fully vet locations, special guests, talking points, etc. Be prepared. Let's talk about the venue that they ended up at, because that's, of course, became much of the story. As Craig said, this young woman who lost her life was beloved in Springfield. They ended up on her street doing this press conference. I understand needing to move. I certainly get that. But being on her street specifically, you had to know. You had to do your vetting and know that the family's not with you. You could have dropped her story in a press release after the fact and not included it during the actual press conference, because you had angel families there behind him who told their story, and it got completely overblown and missed because you gave the left and the media, I repeat myself, you gave them that opportunity to say, look, see, you're heartless and you were attacking, Schaefer and her family, which obviously wasn't the goal there, but you gave that opening by doing it on that specific street. And that's how we lost the message on this. So again, you came in with a great idea on a good issue for us, one little tactical error or a couple little tactical errors, and then you sort of lose most of the benefit you would have walked away with. So those are our learning moments from this, and I hope we do learn, because again, great idea, just not necessarily done in the right way. The how is always as important as the what. Any final thoughts on this before we move on?
I was 100% on you with that one. The venue overshadowed the event itself, and the fact that, somebody didn't do their homework, or at least relay their homework. Nobody who's in any type of leadership role wants to be caught off guard like that. And I think that was really probably the weakest moment in that press conference. And I will just add, the best moment though was the talking of the real ID, the question that was asked about the real ID and why administration is, implementing it on that day, and that they referred to, actually, it was actually the Biden administration that's the one that was choosing that date. So I think those were the highs and lows of that press conference for me, but that venue really just overshadowed everything.
Yeah, well, and we talked about venue. I'll just close with this. Even the initial venue, doing it in front of the governor's mansion, allowed the Democrats to plop a podium there and give a bunch of speeches in front of the cameras. So they're just, overall, everything that had to do with the venues there gave openings to our opponents. And again, they were well-meaning mistakes, but they were mistakes, and we need to learn from them if we're going to win in 2026. So great idea. Let's do it even better next time. All right, let's move to the next thing here. So let's talk U.S. Senate. Since our last recording, we have two new entrants from the Democratic side in the U.S. Senate race. Robin Kelly announced that she would run, and then Roger Krishnamoorthi just recently, a couple days ago, as of the time of this recording, announced he would be running. So you've got two members of Congress in Illinois who will be giving up their seats to run for U.S. Senate. Obviously, they joined Juliana Stratton in the race. Certainly, there's talk of others potentially joining the race as well. Since you guys haven't had a chance to talk U.S. Senate, jump on in and give your thoughts.
Well, there's no doubt that it is going to be interesting for the next 8 to 9 months at a minimum. And you're already seeing some op-eds that are talking about, Governor Pritzker, please don't push your candidate on everyone. This needs to be an open primary. If they didn't learn anything from last year's presidential about closing out the primary and shutting out candidates who are interested, it seems like they're following that path just to a little extent, not as dire. And the voters of Illinois need a chance to see if they're going to get a Chicago politician or someone that represents the whole state. Give all of them a chance, and an open primary is what this country is supposed to be about. Multiple candidates. Now, let's just make sure we have some candidates on the other side, and it becomes a valid general election as well.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely need to talk about that, Craig. But, the saying had always been in politics for a long time. Democrats fall in love in their primaries. Republicans fall in line. And I don't know how well Republicans fall in line anymore, so the saying's probably obsolete. But Democrats fall in love is still true, that in their primaries, they don't do well at being told what to do. They fall in love. And it's one of the reasons why I've said, and I got some pushback from some people who are loyal watchers of this podcast, who I know are watching me say this when this goes live, who sort of chuckled when I said that they should take Lauren Underwood seriously. But I look at this party and I say that Democrats fall in love. And if J.B. Pritzker is going to tell them that you have to go like Stratton, that you must choose Stratton, I can see a significant revolt happening left of center in the party. And if somebody runs as a hard left progressive, they could grab onto that mantle. And so looking at the field, maybe that's Robin Kelly, but that isn't usually her style. It could be Underwood. And as we'll talk about in a second, polling shows Underwood is a serious contender in this race. If Stratton's not going to take that hard left mantle, someone else will. And I could see, Craig, to your point, I could see the Democratic primary voters going, yeah, you don't tell us what to do. I don't care that you're a billionaire. So that could make this interesting. Who else has thoughts?
I agree. I think that if, again, to start talking strategy and tactics, the left is going to telegraph their playbook with this, because it's going to be a blue bloodbath. They're just going to do what they need to do to get where they are, because when you've been winning for so long, like they have been in Illinois, that complacency starts to creep in. Everybody's ego gets a little bit bigger. And to the senator's point, if we can have some kind of organization on our side, that's where we can take advantage of it, because how many hundreds of millions of dollars are going to wind up in this race if JB really wants to do what he wants to do. How do we sit back and position ourselves so that we're not doing the same thing we did in the gubernatorial primary last time? Let's find some people that will give us a good primary so that we can provide that more center leaning candidate that says the left that gets tired of that extremism, we can bring them over, because it's not left and right anymore. It's socialism versus non-socialism. And if we can sit back and let that socialist monster rear its head and be there to take it off with the right candidates, I think we can make some progress on the statewide.
Yeah, if we're going to get a serious candidate for Senate, which is an if, and we should talk about that here at some point, but if we're going to try to make a serious play at this, we need the most progressive possible nominee, which is likely Stratton, but right now she's not talking like a progressive. If there's some money, some deep-pocketed money people who want to play for U.S. Senate, here's the play right now, which is pull a Pritzker and start playing in their primary. Start pointing out where these candidates are not progressive to the voters and make those progressive voters scream and yell and force the candidates to chase that ever leftward leaning tilt now of the Democratic Party. You got to make these people do it, because right now you look at these announcements. We talked about it previously. Stratton's announcement was milk toast for a progressive center of the road. Raja's announcement was 2.5 minutes long, mostly bio stuff. There was some good points there right around minute 2, but overall fairly boring and fairly moderate. You see Robin Kelly's basically the same deal. They're trying to, neither one of these guys or none of these candidates are really run into the left just yet. I wouldn't wait for it to happen. If we want to make a real play for U.S. Senate, we should be forcing them further and further left.
I want to just jump in and say that I'm really happy to see this. The more candidates that get in that race, I think the better, from the standpoint of, I'd love to see them spend a lot of money on a primary for once. And, in the trickle down races as well. Like, you get more congressmen in there, that's freeing up, seats that don't have incumbents in them. So I say the more the merrier, jumping in that race.
Yeah, I mean, Robin Kelly's seat, no Republican's going to win that. I'm trying to find my baselines here, but it's basically D30 something, so that ain't going to happen. But the 8th Congressional District, I mean, Raja made that completely out of play. It's D10 at the moment. That's how it's playing, because Raja overperforms. He won by 14 last time around. We didn't really have an overly powerful campaign against him, let's be real. So, I mean, in a D10 district, but Trump only lost it by 7 this last time. In 2018, Ronald only lost it by 8. I look at the progressive tax. We defeated the progressive tax by 6 in that district. I mean, it's not to say that district is totally out of play. Yes, 17, 6, 14, those are all way more likely, but we could at least mount a challenge in the 8th for the first time in a long time. Be nice to see. When we talk about the Senate race, there's a couple other things we should talk about. So obviously Raja's money, everyone covers that. But you see Pritzker coming in with his cash. I mean, he's lining up his people. We see that Laura Ricketts is one of the co-chairs of Stratton's Finance Committee, a number of other big finance names. There's a number of organizations and big donors that are being pulled to get behind Stratton. Obviously, some high-profile endorsements, including, Carol Moseley Braun this week. So they're already lining up everyone they can to try to clear this field, with reports that they're trying to push other people out. Obviously, some people say that's not true, but Senator, I'm sure you and many others who have dealt with the Pritzker administration can say that they've got ridiculously sharp elbows and they're not afraid to throw them around. So I wouldn't be shocked to see that he's trying to clear this field here.
It'll be interesting to see if the support of Stratton and the attacks on the others, where it comes from. I don't think it'll come directly from the administration, but the question will be, how tied to the administration are those vocal opponents to the other candidates?
Yeah, totally. One last thing we should talk about is a poll is out already from Public Policy Polling. They're a Democratic firm, and they polled this race, doing my math here, a little over a week ago, and asked a number of fave, unfave questions, and then getting into the race. In the head-to-head right now, as they tested it, they tested Stratton, Raja, Underwood, and Kelly. Raja was in first with 20%, Underwood in second with 16, Stratton in third with 13, Robin Kelly in fourth with 8. I'm not of the mindset that I don't think Kelly's going to grow her numbers too significantly, but Stratton being in third, I don't know that I would release that poll, because this was done on behalf of Stratton. The fact that she's under even Underwood, pun intended, when Stratton's had Pritzker in a statewide opportunity and Underwood is not, I don't know, seems not necessarily something I'd want to be admitting. And Raja being in first to start at 20% with almost 20 million in the bank, you got to take Raja seriously in this race. Obviously, their goal was to say, hey, look, if we give the positives for each of these candidates, let's see who moves. But it was done in a very ham handed way. They gave very, very big positives for Stratton and then minimal positives for the others. And then they were saying, hey, look, see, once voters know more, they choose Stratton over everybody else because Stratton takes the lead after that. But anybody who's ever done or read a poll in their lives could see just how opaque that was and how poorly done that was. So wasn't an overly strong tactic on their part, because to me the takeaway is that their candidate is in third behind two Congress people who didn't even have a chance to build up a statewide profile. So that's the takeaway for me.
But that's their arrogance. That's how they're doing things because they've won for so long that they can put somebody with 19 million out there, two congressional, lieutenant governor, and the arrogance that they have that, well, my person's going to get it. I could see them sandbagging that and putting that out there as a way to kind of distance her a little bit from JB and say, look, not everybody thinks that we're doing the greatest jobs. And then that gives them that leeway to bring in, look at how she grows and she made it on her own and all of that stuff. And, I don't know. I don't know if they're tactically smart or tactically stupid, but even a broken clock is right twice a day. And so, I could see them sandbagging it for that reason, just to kind of separate, because if they're tightly bunched, JB's running for president, they've got that, whoever they, put in the gubernatorial thing, he's just trying to stack his team so he can say, look, here is the epicenter of their movement. It's a socialist movement. But look, once they're on the other side of the primary, he thinks he's got a clean look to say, look at Illinois and what we've done there. So I don't know. I wouldn't undersell them as doing it on purpose, as just to kind of say, look, we're distancing from JB a tad bit. Maybe I'm overthinking it.
That's your thing, though, right? You think
I
it's
try
7-8
to.
layers deep?
Trying to.
I think it'll be interesting to see these polls so early. I mean, none of the baggage of these individuals has come out when you're talking about, current day and kind of what people think of them right now. And I think I won't get into details, but I think there's some baggage there. There's some, votes that have been taken and some positions and things that have been said that once those get out may actually really have a huge impact on that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a whole race to be run. There's no doubt about that. All right,
So
close us out, Craig. Go ahead.
Does Stratton benefit from having such a small sampling of legitimate votes compared to the two Congress members at the moment?
I mean, if Stratton didn't come from a pretty vocal background before she got in office, obviously so CTU and everything else, I do think it is an advantage. She hasn't had to put votes on it. I mean, she can take all the good of Pritzker's administration and then pretend she wasn't involved with anything anybody doesn't like. And she was a state representative for about 14 minutes. So there wasn't a lot of votes down there compared to, Raja and Robin and even Lauren having to be in Congress. So I do think both of you, Carolyn and Craig, make a good point there that records are going to play here. All right.
Do we have anybody on our side, though? Is
we
anybody...
didn't talk about that. I mean, there's the problem. Like, I was about to move on because literally we got nothing to talk about.
Right.
I mean, where's the Republican candidate here? I understand Illinois is playing like a blue state right now, but come on. Where's the Republican candidate? We're opening ourselves up for one of two realities. Either we don't get a serious candidate and we look like idiots, or we don't have a serious candidate running and someone like Rod Blagojevich puts his name out there and gets the nomination. So we need to get our act together and get somebody out there. I met with a business person this week who was like, I'm not ready to run for U.S. Senate, but if no one else will put their name out there, I don't want to see my party embarrassed. So fine, I'll do it. And I was like, well, let's give it a month. Let's see if somebody real gets out there. But we are putting ourselves in the danger zone with petitions 3 months away. We got nobody serious right now in this race. I mean, I'm almost ready to do a draft Craig Wilcox Facebook campaign or something. This is getting ridiculous.
You're a little behind. Those all came 3 weeks ago.
Well, I think that there's an opportunity here. I think the infighting that we have going on our side of things is not helping us, because the right kind of candidates that would win something like this are not going to want to come into something that you have to get out of a nasty, bloody primary and deal with the likes of the social media warriors and the people who aren't informed. how do we, as the operatives, how do we build a better apparatus for the right people to step into? It takes a certain type of person, and having, the passion to do it isn't enough. You have to be tactical. You have to know how to operate in a boardroom or a court, or have some kind of tactical ability to exploit these weaknesses. Carolyn said, once we get into their baggage, how do we know how to take advantage of exploiting that type of thing? And so, one of the things that I'm trying to do is, just like you, talk to anybody and everybody who says, I might be interested if these things don't happen. Well, why, how can we not find somebody who says, well, I'll do it, period? I've got one person in mind, out of the South that I've been talking to. In fact, I asked him if I could throw his name out there, but Brian Drew, I've met him along the path. The things that he's doing, his resume is quite impressive in terms of representing Missouri here in Illinois to fight against transgender stuff. He was big on the COVID stuff. So, he's somebody who has at least gone out and fight the fight in the trenches, instead of, sitting there from, the ivory tower saying this is what's wrong. And so, I think it's a matter of getting names out there. I might get, some blowback back on this, but I like Regan Deering. You got to have somebody who understands some of these things in a certain tactical manner. And, with all due respect to the legislators that I don't know, I know we have them amongst our ranks. We just have to make it a favorable environment for a Senator Wilcox, to say that's the next step for me, instead of having to stay in Springfield and say, how do we fight here? And so I don't know. We got to have that conversation more out loud, and stop trying to, I don't know. I don't know the right word in a PG rated environment, but I don't know.
The good
It's
news is we're on
frustrating.
YouTube, so there's limited rules. But your point is valid that it's hard to find a serious candidate run for this, because they're going to get eviscerated in a primary, and then if they make it to a general, they'll get eviscerated in the general, and it's hard to convince someone to leave their successful business
Yep.
or
Because that's what you need. You need
yeah,
somebody successful.
yeah. Yeah, it's a solid point, and I think we should look inward as to part of the reason why we don't have a real serious candidate for this race. But we got to get our crap together, because we only got a few months here.
Somewhere.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our next topic here. Let's go down to Springfield. There's a few big things happening in Springfield, and we've got policy experts and sitting legislators here to tell us what's going on. Before we get into the less important topics, I got to get into the most important topic. For those who don't know, May 7th is Illinois Bacon Day, which, let's be real, that's the most important thing that happened this week. And I'm looking at a Senate Joint Resolution 24 that was designating May 7th as Illinois Bacon Day. Some great names on here: Chris Balkema, Sally Turner, Lee Ariano. This Craig Wilcox, is that how I say it? Kudos for the legislation, Senator, and I'm with you on this. I'd co-sponsor it if I was down there.
So sitting next to Senator Balkema as he was doing the resolution, we're like, well, May 7th, we're in session. That's a great bacon day for the Capitol. So the pork producers came forward, and we had Bacon Day in the Capitol building, and then had a IMA Irma event afterwards where the pork producers were there. You're going to hear maybe a little bit about the BLTs that were available in the Capitol. It was not your traditional bacon, slice of tomato, and lettuce. It was a tomato jam something. Maybe didn't go over as well, but later in the evening, with some smoked pork wrapped and then bacon wrapped, absolutely made up for the lunch, maybe not quite being what everyone was expecting. But without a doubt, the pork producers need to be recognized. May 7th is Bacon Day, is a great day for them. And we had our pins and our stickers, pigs made bacon, and it was fun.
Well, just some stats for those who don't know. I didn't know these stats. Illinois pig farmers produce over 6 billion slices of bacon annually. We are fourth in the nation on pork production, and it supports over 30,000 jobs and almost $14 billion for the economy. So it's an important part. I mean, we don't hear enough about about our farmers, our manufacturers in this state, and they drive our economy. So certainly it's a good excuse to have a conversation like that. All right, let's get into the more policy-related topics now that we've had a little fun. Public transit. So we are a few weeks from the end of session. We've talked off and on a little bit about public transit, but we've heard over and over that we're about to go out over a giant fiscal cliff. And here we are a few weeks out, and we just keep hearing that a plan is close, an agreement is close. And yet, I want to know what's the revenue side of this, because we're getting closer and closer to the end of this process. And yes, reforms are absolutely needed, but they're also going to be coming to taxpayers for some more money to fund this solution that they're coming up with. And I want to know: are we going to hear about this last second overnight on Memorial Day weekend, or are we going to actually hear about it, a little sooner so we can know what we're about to be hit with in our pocketbooks? So curious, Craig, Carolyn, any insights that you guys have on the reforms that are needed, and are we making progress on that? And then what are we hearing on the revenue side?
So this kind of came up last week, and Senator DeWitt had commented that it appeared we were getting a little closer to governance agreements, which seemed to maybe be actual authority for the RTA to oversee some of the responsibilities. And unfortunately, then all of a sudden, I think it was out of the House Dems, someone caveated and said, well, Senator DeWitt's not in the meetings I'm in. They don't know what's going on. And to me, regardless of which is true, just an indicator of, once again, they may be looking at solving this solution on their own and not with those who represent a significant portion of that RTA area, which significantly concerns us. And it still appears the governance is going to precede the money, because as far as I know, there has not been a significant agreement on how the dollars or what those dollar amounts are going to be. Now we're 3 weeks, right? We just this week got the $6 billion or $7 billion revenue enhancement package out of some very progressive allies of the governor. Senator Plummer Harris and I did a press conference today for Small Business Week, and that was the biggest concern. How much more is the governor and their progressive agenda going to tax Illinois residents, and what is that going to do to the working families who are already struggling, having to make difficult decisions? And we know that it comes last minute, and 4 hours, Memorial Day weekend, middle of the night, Saturday or Sunday, when everyone's enjoying themselves. And that's the scary part every May in Illinois.
Well, what I thought was interesting was them saying the quiet part out loud. I mean, I know, Senator, you and your Republican colleagues in both the House and Senate try to be bipartisan, try to contribute to solutions, especially for big issues like this that impact your district more than most of the rest of the people who are down there. And yet you're in meetings, you think you're contributing, and then someone says, oh yeah, they're into fake meetings, I'm in the real meetings. And you're like, all right, well then what are we doing here? I mean, clearly there's the meetings for show and the meetings where actual decisions are being made. And shocker, Republicans aren't being invited to the room where the actual decisions are being made. But Pritzker gets to continue to tout how bipartisan he is.
Well, and on this one, that the Senate versus the House too has been a significant concern in my book. I mean, I've attended or watched, a lot of the Senate side, but I've also been to listening sessions and talked with representatives on the House side, and there's just no alignment there. I mean, the Senate's been doing all this work, doing everything in public, through the hearings, and then the House has been doing their, special task force meetings and kind of their side where they don't include the Republican caucus into those conversations. And the Senate's the one that's getting close, but yet the House is going to be the one that's going to step in and say, they know better. So I think the public in particular needs to be really concerned with that, because the Senate's been having all the public hearings. That's where really all those conversations and the input from the average constituent is taking place. And then the House is going to go and do their own thing. And the funding's not even on the table yet, because I've specifically asked some of the representatives, what's that going to look like? Being on the CMAP board and being part of writing the part plan that came before the General Assembly, that was one of the critical pieces, was we need to talk about that funding. And May 31st is that drop dead date for the RTA. And it's really hard for me to believe that nobody is listening, that 40% of our transit service is going to be cut if they don't reach a funding solution by May 31st. I mean, and that's one we will not gain back anytime in the near future. And want to talk about, equity, and that is transit people use for various reasons. Some do it for convenience, but a lot of people do it for affordability. They do not have an automobile. They have to have that transit system in place to get to work or to get to the doctor or to get to the store. And I think that the average constituent is being lost in this entire process. And I just don't understand it. And we're getting way too close for this to just be a last minute decision. I can't imagine they won't find the money somewhere, but it's going to be on top of, they're already maxed out to begin with. Oh, and now you're asking us for another $1 billion. So that's why we have to raise taxes. I mean, this should be a priority. It should not be an excuse. So I've been really disappointed that it's come this far and they haven't even talked about the funding piece.
Yeah, I mean, especially considering the rumors that they're not even going to talk about it at all until, the veto session, so that they're all safe from primary campaigns before talking taxes. It's just, again, the spinelessness of our left of center leaders in the state sometimes drives me crazy. But, Carolyn, I think you make a solid point. I mean, I've been thinking lately, if you're going to come to me and say, hey, I need you to pay more for public transit, okay, tell me why. Like I'm a fiscal conservative, but if you tell me why we need funding, and to your point, Carolyn, I know there are people who rely on transit. I could be open to a solution, but give me time to okay, why do you need this, and what are you going to do better? Because I've taken the train plenty of times in my life, but it's incredibly inconvenient. I got to drive my car to a full lot and then do a payment system that's arcane, and then I got to rush to make the train after 10 minutes of trying to figure out how to pay for my parking spot. I get on the train, it dumps me on the street way far away from where I actually need to go, and then it's figure out a bus or take an Uber, at which point I should have just driven. That's the inconvenience of our transit system right now. So tell me how you're going to make that better, and tell me how this is going to be better for those lower income communities, those lower income individuals who really, really rely on this, not people like me who it's just, hey, it'd be nice. Tell me those benefits, and then, all right, I'll be open to a discussion on helping to fund that. But that's not what's going to happen here, as you guys well know. And it's just, I can understand why many people, myself included, say, well, then why should we be part of your funding solution? Bring us in on this. If you want us to fund this, then bring us in. Actually engage with us. Let us be part of that collaborative process. Make this a community-driven process instead of just done in some smoke-filled room and then say, here you go, now pay for it.
And I'm with you on that. I mean, I have been asking that all along. Where's this money going to come from, and how are we going to pay for it? But they finally, I attended an RTA summit, and they finally do have the answer to that. They have the information. I'm sure they've been presenting it to the legislators. I can't imagine they haven't been. So, those that need to make the decision and actually put that funding forward have that transformative change, and how that integrated fares and how there's going to be more bus service, more train service, all of those answers to the questions that you've asked are there and answered right now. Finally, maybe it was just a little too late to really have them take it seriously that they need to look at it this session, but it is finally there, and I've finally been sold on it. So I hope some legislators are paying attention and listening to that, because the 40% cuts are also there.
I mean, Carolyn, here's the reality. I mean, Google Maps for how many years now, and Apple Maps and Waze for years now have been able to tell you want to go from here to there. Here's what trains you take. Here's what buses you take. The technology's been around for a really, really long time. At least in the world of technology, it's been a long time. The fact that we are still decades behind in our technology for public transit, you don't have to recreate the wheel here. I mean, that's the thing. Can we have a public-private partnership maybe that doesn't need to recreate the wheel, because the technology already exists and has for a pretty long time now?
Oh, and it's go over. We were in London over the summer. Go there, go to Germany, anywhere else. Yep. But here, yep, it's there and it's being utilized, and it's great.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point, Collin, what we need to do on our side of the aisle is that we need to show the people who are going to be adversely impacted this way, not the people who this is a convenience, but the people who genuinely need this. They're going to be in heavily urban areas, which in Illinois are typically democratically ran areas. If we don't know how to get in and message to those type of communities, this is that right there. Hey, do you understand what your people are doing to you? They're making your life more difficult. And that's how we start churning some of those people that we need to vote for us are in these areas, and they don't know that their own people are the ones that are screwing them in this manner. I can't speak to it the way that Senator and Caroline can, but from a tactical standpoint, I mean, there's your silver bullet. Go tell people in these areas that you want to save some money. here it is. Go talk to your people. Because every time I talk to my state rep, Dennis Tipsor, I talk to the reps here in Tazewell, they tell us that we do a really good job of communicating. Hey, I went to Dennis and I talked to him about the Safety Act, and he broke it down for me. How do we energize and mobilize people to put pressure on their people in these areas that we don't even know how to go in and talk to? So that's where if our audience is that center right, influential type people in this sphere, we have that ability to go into these communities and say, hey, we're not, extremely far right. We understand where you're coming from. We need to take that information that Senator and Carolyn have and get that delivered on a silver platter to the people who are getting screwed the most by this. And we don't have that apparatus at the moment, because if we did, we'd be able to fight better and give the senators and the representatives more support with calls into their office.
And I just want to add in to prioritize it. I mean, this funding should be a priority. There should be cuts in other areas that can be made in order to prioritize transit, because it does affect the daily lives. So Craig knows way more about the budget than I do, but I'm sure there's plenty of things they could find $700 million to cut in that budget that they could put towards this transit system that affect people's everyday lives.
If you get the governor and the legislature to stop funding free healthcare for illegal immigrants, you have funding for the transportation cliff. The challenge is, what I really hope we don't get to is a 1-year funding solution this year, no governance structure, and we just start all over again next year. That just kicking the can for $770 million is not going to be good. And that's what we need to be protecting against for all of our constituents.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, I call this in the agenda item, I call it a bailout, because the reality is, well, RTA, Metra, PACE even, certainly have some reforms needed. Let's be real. CTA is the gorilla here, the problem child with the massive pension debt. And they're doing themselves no favors. I mean, the reality is, as we record this on Thursday, tonight, there's reports that the CTA board is having a special meeting because Brandon Johnson is trying to put his buddy in as CTA president. I mean, it's real hard for, the citizens of Illinois and the taxpayers of basically the suburbs, because I'm assuming we'll pay most of the brunt of this, because we always do. With the suburbs pays while the rest of the state enjoys. I'm going to imagine we're going to pay a lot of this, and you see the CTA and Johnson playing these games. I'm not interested in paying more taxes to bail them out. I'll just be real. I mean, that's not on the table for me or anybody who thinks like me.
Well, and that's why the governance is so important, because of the way that original MMA bill came out. It was significantly tilted for Mayor Johnson, who, chief of staff to the CTU, buddy to the CTA. I mean, that's what we would be getting. And the last thing this mayor needs is a hollowed out mayor staff. How much worse could he get with all of his quote unquote best members going elsewhere around the city to impose governance?
I feel like that's a hold my beer meme from Brandon Johnson, just waiting to be made. All right, let me keep us moving for the sake of the agenda. Craig already mentioned the press conference that they had wow, good English, Collin, that they had done earlier today, being Thursday, the day we record this, talking about how there's significant revenue enhancements. Gotta love the terminology coming from the left, which is, as we talked about last week and prior to that as well, just basically going to small business owners, manufacturers, farmers, and saying, here, guys, pay some more. As if they're not already overtaxed enough as it is. And so kudos to you, Senator, and Jason Plummer and Erica Harris, some of my favorite members of our Senate Legislative Caucus, for calling that out in today's press conference. They have a rosier than expected revenue forecast that came out, but Pritzker's budget is still $700 million under. That's without all the new spending they're trying to add to it. So there is going to have to be revenue enhancements or tax hikes in order to fund this thing. And again, we're barreling towards that resolution in the coming weeks. So I'll start with you, Senator, since you did the press conference. But I've heard tremendous amounts of pushback, whether it's the $6 billion that Pritzker's allies want to push for, whether it's the jobs tax that I know NFIB and a number of other organizations are pushing against, to give 18 weeks of paid time off to every employee in Illinois. There's significant tax hikes being proposed, let alone obviously a rehash of the progressive tax. So what are you seeing, Craig?
Well, and even, it's not quite tied to the governor yet, but those are the allies. But now we have one of the Dem House reps acknowledging she'll look at those proposals because funding is required. And we haven't even got to what the legislative adds are to the governor's budget. So that hole is a floor, not the ceiling of the request. Do we see that before May? The end of May, I don't know. That becomes the real challenge. And like you said, right, once petitions are submitted, veto session makes it a little easier to put something on the table, but there's still elections coming. And this governor has, Jason nailed it. He's going to be my OG when we get to that point in answering the questions during that press conference. But 1.6 million have left. You look at the IRS data on who's left versus who's coming into the state. We are not growing our economy. We trail in unemployment. So the picture is not there for what needs to happen to satisfy Democrat spending desires.
Well, Craig, and what drives me crazy is we have years and years and years of data that say our lack of job growth, our lack of increasing our economy is going to be coming back to bite us here in the coming years. When even Rich Miller on his blog multiple times says that we're screwing up on jobs, we got to do a better job on jobs. Even Pritzker's de facto spokesperson says that. That tells you there's a problem, and yet now they're going to say no. All those future numbers that look awful, our revenue projections that look awful, that's because of Trump. It's all because Trump's been cutting our funding. It's like no. The projections have been showing this for years, even when Biden was in office, by the way. This is not a Trump problem. This is a Illinois problem that we have dug this hole for ourselves. But of course, since there's no investigative journalism anymore, at least not with the legacy media, they're just taking that story and running with it. This is all Trump. And so when Pritzker next year, the year after, or whoever replaces him, if they're a Democrat, when they say, hey, this is all Trump's fault, they're just going to parrot it. But the reality is, it's the fact that we have not grown our economy. In many ways, we have shrunk our economy in this state. People are leaving. There's less and less of us to pay these bills. That's a significant problem. That bill comes due, and it's coming due right now as the COVID money is drying up. Something else worth talking about here is I mentioned that jobs tax. So TMA, the Technology Manufacturing Association, they polled their members, their manufacturers, to say how many of you support this family and medical leave program. 8% supported it, 80% opposed it. So you want to have an idea of just how much support something like that has from our manufacturing community. That will tell you just how unpopular that program is and that tax is. All right, let's move on to our next topic here. This is our last political topic before we get into our news you can use. But it was announced by the Democratic Party of Illinois, as well as their County Chairman's Association, that they have launched their 2026 candidate recruitment program. They have a coordinated program statewide to recruit candidates, many of which they just got elected throughout the state in the municipal elections. And now they're going to be recruiting people to run for county office, county-wide office, state office, and in some cases, even federal office. And our DuPage County Republican Party flagged one of those candidates. Somebody who was elected, Councilman Ian Holzhauer, was re-elected in Naperville. He's already announced he's running for DuPage County Board District 5. He's on that Democratic program. And we got to talk about this because Democrats, they have this process. They build the bench, they move them up. It's a coordinated effort statewide with funding, with staff, with effort, with time. I understand our Republican Party does struggle with not as much funding, but we just had a super successful Red Gala that brought in a good amount of money. I understand it's all about get out the vote, but if we don't have candidates to get the vote out for, then it doesn't matter how much we do on VBM and early voting if there's no candidates worth voting for. We've got a few months here. We got to get our act together and get out there recruiting candidates because the Democrats, they've already lapped us a few times. They might lap us again because they're already out there actively doing it. Curious if you guys have any thoughts, or I might have just done the rant myself, but if you guys have thoughts, jump on in.
I have a couple, just because I hope that they do a little bit better vetting on their, when they move their candidates up, because we've had some candidates, they're just throwing any name on the ballot. And there was, one here, he actually was, I believe he was in jail the night of the election even. They just are not vetting their candidates.
Walter Moist?
That'd be him. Yeah, that, it's just there was no vetting done, and there's all this baggage that they carry, and then it's just, if they've gotten, some of them have gotten into office, and if they're gonna move up in those ranks, like you're saying, that's a scary thing. So I think that Republicans are a little more cautious, maybe too, as to why we don't get the number of candidates out there, because we do a little bit more. I don't know if formalized vetting, but we like to know the people that we are actually supporting. But it's a scary thought that if some of these individuals that have gotten into office are going to be moving to higher office.
Well, I mean, let's be real. For the Democrats, it's, do you have a D after your name, and that's it. That's all. That's all the vetting that they do. I mean, what's their policy agenda? Stratton just said it this week. Her whole agenda is oppose Trump. Like, they don't stand for anything. They don't have any policies. So the vetting is just, do you have a D after your name, and or do you hate Trump? That's it. Okay, cool. We'll put you on the ballot. I do like that we have more of an interest in actually vetting qualified candidates. So I'm with you there, Carolyn. But I think, the time to move was months ago. I mean, you obviously had participated in some statewide campaigns in the past. We had gubernatorial candidates announcing in January and February 4 years ago. Here we are in May, and we've got maybe one semi-serious candidate who's announced. Like, we're way behind the eight ball for sure.
That speaks to the lack of the infrastructure that has kind of been the theme of where we're at in this discussion, and all the ones that I've seen and been a part of, is that, we talk about building a bench, but we don't acknowledge that we don't have a farm system. We're not organized. We have 74 counties that have under 50,000 people. 51 of them have under 25,000 people. You want to talk about low-hanging fruit? Those are going to be the people who can get organized. That's where we can find some of these candidates to build away from the animal that is the Democratic Party. Because here in Central Illinois, they had Peoria. Now they're going after McLean. Well, what's next? Tazewell County. Tactically speaking, that they're coming for us because, well, we're Tazewell. And so, what we've done around here is we're trying to change the culture. Complacency kills in a lot of the environments that I found myself in younger. It's the same thing here. We have to do a better job of working hard. I sat with Matt James a couple of days ago, and he said, we've got the people, we got to work hard. We've got to get that organization, that money that came in from the Red Gala. That's great, but we're facing races where we're 10 to 1, 25 to 1 being outspent. You're not going to catch that money and then outspend that. We have to outwork, and that's where, if they've got a good bench, we got to get a better farm system. That's where we've got to get the county chairman to get out. I'm always banging the drum on the PC program because that is the blood of democracy. If we can figure that out, that's how you build that farm system. That's how you get, your county-wide. We got shellacked in the consolidated. Why? Because the Democrats decided to let their money trickle all the way down. We can't get organized for assistant dog catcher. How are we ever going to compete with them? And that's where I think that, the operatives that are there, with all due respect to the legislators, they're handcuffed. They're out there legislating. It's operatives like us, the other three on this panel. We have to be doing a better job of turning people towards what we can do. Throwing those names out there. Once we have the money, do we have that operational capacity to do something with it? And that to me, we've got great candidates around Central Illinois, and I know we have them around the other five corners of Illinois. How do we position them to go out and fight that fight so that we can get people who can run for U.S. Senate and clear-cut gubernatorial candidates? Because, they've shown it on that local level. We can disrupt that Democratic pipeline by just putting common sense in their way and diverting the voting base to us. So,
Yeah, Corey, listen, I hear you. I can simply say part of the problem when you say operatives like us, I've spent over $1 million and a significant amount of time out of my own pocket, out of my own schedule, to do trainings, to go out there and recruit candidates, to hire people, to then go and recruit candidates. And I take nothing but flack because, he's just an evil consultant. It's like, that was my own money, my own time to try to help build this party. Y'all want to just attack me? Fine, I'll just be a capitalist. I'll just go make money and let you deal with the problem. But you're not recruiting
free market
candidates.
Principles.
You're not doing training. So at a certain point, the people like me, when you say operatives, I've had people on my staff for 6-8 years now who their full-time job was candidate recruitment, and I took crap for it for 6-8 years. So we don't do it as much now. Sorry, you don't want to work with us, you want to attack us, you're on your own. So I think part of this is like, let's all say we're all part of the solution. Let's work together. I see some of the conservative grassroots groups who are actively trying to recruit PCs. That's awesome to me. Even though that some of the people who are running that have been not necessarily allies of mine or some of the rest of us. I think it's a great thing when we build the party, and I won't speak anything negatively about what they're doing because they're helping build the party. That's the
Mhm.
mentality we need to have instead of just
That's
ripping
the
each other
farm
apart
system.
constantly.
The grassroots are the farm
Well,
system.
but the positive part about that farm system for us, the smaller the municipality in the area that we have, the more likely you can name 5 to 8 household names
Bingo.
that people already know. That's, maybe it's just canvassing the residents. Who do you already know? Who do you respect in the community? And then we go and do some targeted discussions on them to see if we can turn them into candidates. It's not as easy to do when you're downtown Chicago or in some of the more urban
Mhm.
areas. So, understanding that the areas we represent do provide positives and then emphasizing that can be a critical aspect to that role.
Fair.
And I just want to add to it too, when we're talking about vetting, we need to, I guess, vet with caution in the sense that we don't need to overly vet and do that Republican litmus test and try to catch people. And, I welcome too anyone that wants to come and be a PC or come and be a potential candidate. That's great. I think made reference to the Red Gala. I mean, they said there, even the most moderate of Republicans is better than any Democrat. So we just need to remember to keep focused on it is that kind of big tent philosophy, and we can't just forgo allowing someone to be supported by the party or people within it or run for a candidacy just because they may not be 100% with those values. And I think Republicans sometimes think about that too much, and when we need to start just embracing anyone that wants to come along and give back.
Yeah, I mean, we did a whole way too long podcast for 100th episode just on that topic, and both sides need to be better. I mean, we have way too many of those people who consider themselves moderates who constantly attack conservatives. We have too many conservatives who constantly attack those who consider themselves more moderate. Both sides have to stop. So it isn't just one side of that fight that needs to turn their guns to the actual enemies, which is the Democrats. So we got some work to do there. But let me move us along just because I want to keep us on the agenda here. So let's go to our news you can use. This is our second to last section here, where we always give information that our viewers, our listeners can use, whether it's in your fundraising, in your social media. Usually it's the bad news to contrast ourselves with the other side. Sometimes it's good news, and we got some of that too. Let's talk about a few topics here. So the first thing is, if you have noticed or paid attention to the news, Lion Electric is closing. And with it, all those promises that Pritzker and the Democrats made about the many jobs that they were going to be supposedly employing in Illinois. I think it was 1,400 was the name that they promised. And now it's actually 0. And this isn't really about Lion Electric because there's a lot of people who say, well, we gave them lots of money. In reality, at least in Illinois, they hadn't, from what I've seen, hadn't gotten the money yet. Maybe federally from Biden's administration, they did. My point is this. Picking winners and losers isn't working. Having an economy, having an environment in Illinois that's so anti-business, you can't overcome that by just doing some giveaways to a few select businesses that you want to have a big flashy press conference for. That strategy, that method is not working. As we talked about earlier in the podcast, this idea that it's not an idea, it's the reality that Illinois is horrible when it comes to jobs and growth and supporting our manufacturers, our farmers, our small businesses. We are not growing jobs and employment. And so, yes, when you have a great situation like Lion Electric going to bring 1,400 jobs, great, have your press conference. But when you put all your eggs in that basket, and then that fails, you open yourself up to rightful attacks that your approach is not working. So I don't necessarily blame Pritzker for Lion Electric. I blame Pritzker for that method of governance, that we could have a horrible business climate in his minds, but if we just do some giveaways to the Lion Electrics of the world, we'll be fine. Well, when those Lion Electrics don't actually open, well, now we're left with nothing. And I think that is the major problem here, is governing by press release, governing by splashy press conferences is not improving our economy.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I'm not sure I believe that no dollars were ever paid out. I think they cherry picked the locations where they showed they didn't pay out. But as you mentioned, right, the governor or the government picking winning industries or business over another business is not the way to go. We have the North Carolina example, right? We were outperforming North Carolina until, what was it, 8 years ago when they reduced the corporate income tax rate, and they are now significantly outproducing Illinois in a one-to-one example, which is always hard to do, right? Everyone's going to have caveats. But the reality is It is policy changes that drive the economy, not government give out on taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, and every week there's new stories, new examples of factories that are closing. I mean, there's a plant in Riverdale that's now going to be idle that lays off 281 workers. I mean, it's just every week. We'd be here for the whole hour and a half of me listing, all the examples if we were to list them from every week. I mean, it's just, this is not working. It's very clear. All right, let's go to the next one here. So Lane and Post is going to bring up a chart that was put out by WirePoints this week using U.S. Census Bureau data. But it's pretty interesting because they looked at home values in the nation and home value growth in the whole country. And most of the states grew by 40 to 80% since 2000. A few of them grew by 100%. So you're wondering, hey, how did my home value do compared to the rest of the country? Most of the country saw 40 to 80% growth. Illinois was last at 14%. So yet again, you look at another economic indicator, and yet again, here Illinois is at the bottom or the bottom three. And home value is a big deal because as we're paying more and more property taxes, the excuse usually is, hey, pay higher property taxes, but at least your home value will go up. In Illinois, we get the double whammy of your property taxes going up, but your home value being stagnant. 14% in what is 24 years here, roughly. 14% is not going to cut it.
No doubt a direct tie. You talked last week, I believe, about the 27 counties in the top 50 highest property taxes, right? So you've got new home buyers, lack of inventory, mortgage rates about where their parents were used to paying, job growth that has not kept up, wage growth that has not kept up. But, if we encourage more prevailing wage or more union employment, that's what's going to drive job growth. If we keep raising the minimum wage, it is the government policy that is holding us back, right? We always talk about everything Illinois has, the center of the Midwest, the transportation, the education, the great workforce, and yet we can't unlock that potential because of the policies being put in place by the left.
Yeah, this state, I mean, we talked about it, I think it was last week, whenever it happens, whenever there's a Republican governor with a governing majority down in Springfield, they're just they can sneeze and see an improvement in this economy because it's not going to take much. We have decades of bad governance in this state. It won't take much to suddenly see these numbers start to climb because of just bad decision after bad decision, bad policy. I'm kind of jealous. Whoever gets to be governor who does that is going to be a rock star nationally because it's not going to take much to start to see tremendous improvement in our economic indicators, because there are so many benefits in Illinois. If you actually had a government that supported our businesses, supported our workforce, supported our working families, my goodness, what explosive growth we could see in this state. Forget Texas, forget Florida. We could be a driver of the economy nationally. I hope I live to see it. That's all I got to say. And I'm only 39.
Well, and to that point, if you zoom out a little bit further, we don't have an environment that's conducive to businesses want to be here because businesses require safety. So when they're attacking and they want this lawless state that they're creating, which is where we kind of led with the need for Kristi Noem to come in here, if it's not safe, businesses aren't going to be there. If businesses aren't going to be there, those who can't get out, well, they're going to continue to vote Democrat because they're told that it's our fault. It's Orange Man bad. And so I think that, like you said, Collin, the person who comes in and just blinks the right way with some common sense is going to absolutely be propelled into that, GOP conversation nationally just because the conditions are right.
Yeah. Let's go to the last one. Let's talk good news. It's good news with a caveat. The caveat is we keep seeing the left dominate the narrative on tariffs, and we give them that opening because the way that the administration's handled these tariffs has created a lot of uncertainty and has been not necessarily super effective. However, what we're not doing a great job on is pushing back and giving the other side of the story. So I'm trying to do that. I did it last week. I'm doing it again this week. Thanks to TMA for these stats. There's two things I think people need to be aware of. Number one is manufacturing orders are rising in the economy. The job growth is beating expectations. So U.S. manufacturing orders rose 4.3% in March. It's the third consecutive monthly increase. It was $618.8 billion. So we're seeing an increase in U.S. manufacturing, and that supposedly supposedly is the point of the tariffs. Make things in America again. Why we're not talking about this, I don't know. So that's why I'm equipping you, our viewers, with some of these stats. The point of the tariffs, whether you agree with them or not, the point is we want to bring the manufacturing back to America. We want to bring the jobs back to America. So if I see 3 straight months of increased U.S. manufacturing orders, that's good news. We should be talking about it. We also see that even though, yes, government employment dropped in this latest jobs report, private sector job growth significantly beat expectations. Again, good news, positive news. And so you see the whole point of DOGE is let's spend less money on employing people with the government. Let's employ them in the private sector. No one ever actually says that because my party's so horrible at messaging and communications. But these are things we should be talking about instead of just letting the left steamroll us over on tariffs and DOGE and everything else. So trying to equip you with some of these stats you can use in your daily conversations. Hopefully it helps.
I'm bullish on the tariffs. I think it's great. I mean, we have
if done
just
better, if done better.
well, but even so, it's being done. I mean, it's to the point of if we got a Republican governor here, it would be better than what was happening. And, you know, you've talked about the tariffs. You also have to talk about the global security issues that go along with some of that because it's a recalibration all the way around. But the fact that we're pushing these jobs back here, you know, Illinois is ripe. If we'd stop giving manufacturing plans to China, you know, we could put our own people and our own money here. But, you know, the fact that, you know, I didn't see the details of it, but apparently UK came to the table in the last 24 hours and said, you know what, we've got something, you know, Trump, he's the art of the deal. You know, he's going to go and ask for everything and then negotiate down to something that's a little bit more manageable. But do we have the stomach here as United States, you know, people to say we need to buy less cheap stuff? Almost got the swear word out there. But we got to buy less cheap stuff and take pride in where we're getting it from. I always look for American first, you know, but when it's 3-4 times what I can get, I'm a single dad of 3 teenagers. I save money where I can. But if I can accept some of this stuff and say, okay, you know, a few more months of this, if we can get recalibrated, that's what's going to give my kids a future that's affordable to them. So I'm all for it. I'm on board with it because I see the long-term potential if we can just stomach some of this short-term uneasiness that comes along with, you know, President Trump doing the things the way that he does them.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can mistake haphazard policymaking for art of the deal, but I do grant your point. There are potential benefits to this. It's how we're doing it. Remember, we started the whole podcast on that. How you do it matters. And we're struggling both with the policymaking and the messaging of it, because there's no message out that says, hey guys, this is going to hurt for a little bit, but here are the long-term benefits. There's nobody nationally saying that and putting it out. So all that's left is people going, this ain't working. So we got to do a better job messaging it for sure.
So your future Fortune 500 companies are those TMA manufacturers, your small and medium-sized manufacturers who get back to the core of America, which is make good products that last, right? Get rid of the MBAs and the doctorates who are talking about building in, built-in obsolescence or making everything remove and replace. The American individual wants to be able to fix their own stuff when it breaks. So those manufacturers of today that are ready to build American products, build them well, build those that will last, they will be the ones expanding and growing in the next decade here in America.
Yep. And that's what we want, right? That's the whole point of this. So we got to get better about talking about it. So thank you for doing that. All right, let's go to our final segment. We always have some fun with this. Our OG and Clown of the Week. There's no rules here. Try to keep it political. Try to keep it Illinois, but your OGs and clowns, go for it.
I'll
Carolyn
go.
was excited.
I
Go
have
ahead.
a really good clown of the week because I was losing it yesterday with the press conference that the Democrats did after the Kristi Noem visit. The Secretary of State, Alexi Giannoulias, he dropped not one, but 2 F-bombs during that press conference. And I know it's been in, Forbes had an article, the Trib's been carrying articles, it was in the Hill, like on this F-bombs being dropped during press conferences. I just cannot get around it. I mean, I like a good F-bomb, in my daily life, in my household, but in a press conference in public, in where, an elementary school child could not now watch their current news because of the language that's being utilized. I just think it is so wrong. So for that, he has my clown of the week.
Well, especially when they keep telling us we're supposed to be more civil and use, more civil language, and then this is what they're doing. It's clearly intentional. So I can echo and second your clown nomination. Good work.
And I get with my OG
Go
on
for it.
that.
There's no rules. Go for it.
So on my OG
Thunderdome.
is Governor Edgar. I was an Edgar Fellow last year, and he had a fundraiser last night, and he gave an address. I did not attend, but did read what he said. And he's always been my OG, just because during Edgar Fellows, he was there from the morning when we started till the night when we ended, all week long. I mean, I could not believe that the dedication that he has, and now with his compromised health for him to go to the fundraiser last night and get up there and speak the same the sentiment that he has carried through his leadership program. He was talking about compromise and compassion. And I think this is what we were talking about before. I mean, we need to all have empathy. We need to collaborate together. We really need to, in order to be civil and just get things done in this state. He just continues to speak that word, and he's my OG because of his dedication to it. And I know it can be controversial with some people these days, but that's what we need. I mean, he speaks what we need, and he is so principled, and the knowledge that he has and how he is civil, he has my respect in every way.
I struggle with that, Carolyn, because obviously I want to see him beat this cancer, and I hope that he does, and I love to see that he was up and about. But I hate when I see politicians speak out of both sides of their mouth, and so I'll just give this gentle pushback to Governor Edgar directly, not to you, which is, he said those things, that he wants the 3 C's: civility, compromise, and compassion, and it was part of his sort of speech attacking Trump. Okay, I'll grant you that that's what you want to see out of Trump. But then he's also praising Pritzker, and let's look at those 3 C's when it comes to Governor Pritzker. I mean, civility, Pritzker is the leader right now in the Democratic Party for a lack of civility. He's calling on Democrats to not have civility in politics, to not let Republicans have a moment of peace. What many of us took as a call for violence, and maybe that wasn't his goal, but it certainly wasn't civility. You talk about compromise. We talked in this podcast. Pritzker and his Democratic Party has no interest in Republican participation in governance in this state. Where's the compromise from J.B. Pritzker? And compassion, you can't look at the people who rely on this state, those with mental health needs, who see the lowest funding in the country, developmentally disabled people under Pritzker administration being abused and neglected, the most needy of our children at DCFS dying, and nobody seems to care about it. Pritzker's not doing anything about it. I don't see compassion there. And so I think I would wholeheartedly agree with Governor Edgar that we need the 3 C's. But Governor Edgar, if you're going to hold the president to those 3 C's, then I would ask you respectfully, hold our governor to the same 3 C's. I'd like to see that as well.
And I'll agree with you. And just having gone through that program, I think he would welcome that conversation. I think that's the whole overarching point of those 3 C's is having that conversation, having both sides of it, and being able to get together and have it civilly. So, I agree with you on many points, and I think he would as well. But having that conversation is the important part.
Yeah. Who else has got OGs or clowns?
So I think I mentioned Representative Ma being the first out as an elected official to say she was willing to look at the $6 billion revenue enhancements, i.e. new taxes. But the other 2, hopefully this is indicative of what we're going to see over the next couple weeks. Representative Costa Howard and LaShawn Ford having a public display argument pre-committee. Apparently Costa Howard holding it against Ford for what he said about her homeschooling bill. And now she's claiming process fouls, and she's not going to let his bill be heard. I think that as we go into the end of May, keep our eyes out for those public displays and those splits, because it will be indicative of how we can further help show the divide that they have, presuming they don't all of a sudden come together, kumbaya, $6 billion in raised taxes, and we've got a budget.
I mean, Costa Howard, she definitely, I mean, the pettiness she has shown over the last month to 2 months has been significant. I don't know if maybe she's just kind of done with politics or what, but she's been petty over and over again. It's going to bite her for sure.
And then certainly the OG, the way Senator Plummer handled the questions in our small business press conference about why we're not in a conducive environment for business in Illinois. He certainly took hold of that, and Senator Harris and I were there to support him.
Nice. I'll never turn down a Jason Plummer mention on the podcast.
I'm going to zoom out on my clown to JB. I mean, he's a natural target for that. But specifically, and I'm going to call back on my veteran community to hear this. When we get called Nazis at the State of the State, and then they incite violence, whether it's a dog whistle or directly, like when we took that oath, it was to defend our country against terrorists, both foreign and domestic, and that's what that sounds like to me. And so, if you're pompous enough to sit there from your billionaire's, mansion and tell us, the Republicans who are doing this, the two-way people, the ones with the guns, and you're trying to call violence to us, I mean, you're a no talent clown at that point. If that's all you have to call us out that way, and so there's so many clowns on that side. But if he is that person that it thinks he can lead that party, well, you got to go through a lot of people to get to that. And I don't know, when you're going to incite violence from an executive position like that, you're not a leader. You're exactly what he's trying to call us. And so that he's a clown. He's been a clown for a while. The whole thing, the OGs, I want to give that a shout out to the grassroots. Nobody in particular, but I know there's a lot of people out there who consider themselves grassroots. There are players that aren't, but the people who haven't given up yet, the people who are still in the trenches listening to this and trying to figure out how to support our legislators like Senator Wilcox and their own electeds. Those are the ones that we need to figure out how to pump them up and bring them to the table. And because I'm a hockey guy, you put me on the spot last time and caught me in a trap with the acquisition of Carter Hart. You got me. But I do want to point out Mikko Rantanen from the Dallas Stars is the first hockey player to notch back-to-back hat tricks in the Stanley Cup playoffs. One in Game 7 against one of my beloved teams, his former Colorado Avalanche. But to put up a hat trick in the playoffs like that, that's OG. So, yeah.
Yeah, impressive stuff. I'm just watching the Blackhawks looking at the draft. We dropped a spot, so we're at spot 3, but I'm hoping we get somebody decent there.
It's a good draft, so.
Yeah. All right, I'll do mine quickly so we can get out of here. But OG, I got to say this. I mean, it was announced today. We're recording this on Thursday that Catholics have a new pope. I am not Catholic, so I'll simply say that I do think it's pretty cool that the first American pope is from Chicago, actually more the south side of Chicago, not actually Chicago. But the OG really here is the memes I've already seen. I mean, him holding a deep dish pizza and a Malort, though the reality is he's from the south side, so it should be an Aurelio's pizza. I think Chris would agree with that. There was a meme actually. So Abby, my wife, said that if SNL doesn't lead with a "duh Pope," with the super fans, it's a fail. It's a complete miss. A whole bunch of other memes that have been going around that have been pretty spectacular. So, and apparently he's a Cubs fan. So, congrats to you, Cubs fans. Though he wouldn't be any help to the White Sox, even if he was a White Sox fan. So, even Jesus couldn't save this team. As for clowns, so you mentioned the grassroots, and I just want to say this, Corey, I want to encourage us to maybe stop attacking each other so much. And here's my example of this. So Trump's Justice Department this week just announced that they weren't going to fight on the telehealth abortion bill. And I have seen no peep at all out of pro-lifers or conservatives about how Trump went against the platform, went against the party, which, I mean, he's continuing a Joe Biden decision here when he did this. And they're saying, well, just let him cook. Just let him cook. He's got a larger plan. And I respect that. I understand that. But then can we hold our other Republican leaders to the same standard that, you know what, maybe sometimes they have to make certain decisions that are part of a grander plan instead of just eviscerating them? Because if any other Republican had done this, if any other Republican had said, I'm not going to fight against the abortion pill, they would be skewered or crucified for coming out like that. We've got to hold our leaders to the same standard. And if you're going to say for Trump, it's okay, he's got a whole plan, it's okay, then can we maybe have a little bit of a grace for our other Republican leaders in similar situations? That's my personal request. A couple other quick ones here. Apparently, there's a primary challenger to Darren LaHood. Some of those grassroots people. I mean, listen, I have defended the grassroots people, but they keep making it harder and harder for me. There's some of them were cheering that, ooh, we've got a primary challenger now to LaHood. What's your problem with Darren LaHood? He's pro-Trump. He's super conservative. Like, if Darren LaHood isn't conservative enough for you, then just we need to quit. We need to be done. Like, I don't understand it. This guy's not for real. He's from Chicago. He's not even from the district. So LaHood will be fine. But this idea that even Darren LaHood now isn't conservative enough for our party, I don't even know what party we are then. All right, here we go. So there's a photo Lane's going to bring up on screen. I don't know that there's a clown here. It just had nowhere else to put this. So 4 individuals that were at Mar-a-Lago that popped up on social media this past week. It's not about Kent Gray on the left. He's not the issue here, but you see Rod Blagojevich, Aaron Schock, and Jim Oberweis in that photo at Mar-a-Lago. Obviously, Oberweis is trying to get Trump's favor to run for Congress for Brian Donald's old seat in Florida. Rod Blagojevich is there, possibly laying groundwork for some Trump support for a Senate run. Aaron Schock was kind of a shock to me, pun intended. Like, I didn't have him in my bingo card for 2025, but he's popped up a few times lately. He did a fundraiser for Trump in Pennsylvania last October, along with some others like Matt Gaetz. So that was kind of weird and surprising. He did an event with Tulsi Gabbard up in Wisconsin for Trump last October. Aaron Schock very well may be trying to plot a comeback here, which he's said for a few years now that he was gonna. So keep an eye out for that name, I guess. But the photo itself was just a very weird pairing of 3 individuals on the right there. Last 3 I have here for my clowns. You mentioned J.B. Pritzker, Corey. I'm going to also mention him, but for something different. We talk about ethics a lot and the need for increased ethics in this state. Well, J.B. Pritzker goes and appoints his brother-in-law to the U of I board. And when called out for it, because there are rules that say you cannot appoint family members to state positions, you can't appoint relatives. Apparently there's a loophole here where he's allowed to do it with the U of I because they're a separate entity. I mean, this governor has said several times that he thinks our ethics are just fine in this state, despite the fact that we have a corruption conviction over and over in Illinois. And yet, according to J.B. Pritzker, we're doing just fine on ethics. And he is part of the problem, clearly. If he's going to appoint a family member to the U of I board, I haven't seen enough people call him out for that, but I'm certainly going to do it. We have a price tag, finally, on the complete failure of Brandon Johnson in the city of Chicago for a lot in Chicago that was supposed to hold a migrant tent, but they didn't even do their due diligence. The EPA came in, did some studies and said, hey, you can't put this tent here. Well, we now have a price tag on what that cost taxpayers, $1.8 million just pissed away, basically, because Brandon Johnson didn't actually have a plan and didn't handle that properly. But hey, no big deal. 1.8 million, taxpayers will just pay it. We'll all move on with our lives, I guess. Last one here is a clown, Jackie Trainier. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. Trainier, I don't know. But she's a Will County board member. We talked about it a month or 2 ago. She hit a child in her car who was riding on a bicycle. She's now resigned from DuPage Township as one of the administrators, citing mental and emotional stress. She's still on the Will County board, so I guess kudos for finally resigning from DuPage Township, but it's time you also resign from the Will County board for hitting a kid on his bike and then trying to cover it up. You don't deserve to be an elected official for that. So my second clown of the week for you, Jackie. All right, final thoughts. Those who saw, Carolyn did have to go at 4:30. So Carolyn, we love you. Thanks for being with you. Final thoughts from Craig and Corey as we close down the podcast. Sorry, I'm supposed to pick who goes first. Corey, go ahead.
No,
sorry about
that's
that.
all right. Yeah, so really, for those of us down here in Springfield, bear with us as we go through these last 3 weeks. There will be some bill surprises. We will try and keep you up on what's going on. For all those homeschoolers out there, no bill is truly ever dead until sine die, and there's shell bills out there. So stay in tune to what's happening, but don't waste your Memorial Day weekend waiting to hear how bad the budget bill really was. We'll let you know, and artificially, we won't truly know what's in it for days after it already passes. But other than that, enjoy the spring coming. I see the green leaves behind Collin. It's been flowering down here in Springfield for a while, but we're ready for that warm weather and the fun and sun of summer.
Yeah, it couldn't be. You look at the weather this whole week and going to next week, it was like warm, 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 cold on Thursday, then warm, warm, warm. So I got multiple layers on because I just had to have a cigar today. But Corey, your final thoughts?
Yes, sir. As usual, thank you for having me on. Always a pleasure. If people see me putting my head down, I'm not bored. I'm taking notes because I'm learning, just as much here in Senator and Caroline talk as well. But what I want to leave with is we've got to do a better job of creating our culture. Senator comes from the military. He understands, that's one of the things that makes us successful in the force that we are. If we have that right culture, if we've got that right leadership that's saying the right things, it makes it very easy to achieve the objectives that we need to. We need to work harder. I know that's a tall ask because it seems like it's a lot of people doing, a lion's share of the work. But guess what? That's where we are in Illinois GOP. If you're here either by choice or because you're stuck, you might as well put your head down, keep your powder dry, and keep moving forward. And if that's the case, we got to unify. You called out a couple people by names that are saying things. We got to do a better job of not cannibalizing ourselves this early on, trying to figure out how we can have a voice of reason that can kind of unite those five corners of Illinois. This is a big key piece for me watching this on a weekly basis. We got to find those sources. We got to find those people that we can trust and say, hey, you don't stab me in the back, I won't stab you in the back. But if you do, I'm coming for you. And if we can figure out how to work together better, I mean, we can win. Can we win in 26? Depends on how organized we can get. But in 2030, absolutely. It's just a matter of can we get those right people in those positions. And so, yeah, shameless plug from Tazewell. We've got our Lincoln Day dinner coming up. RNC Chair Michael Watley is going to be in town. And then we've got a fundraiser coming up exactly 1 month after that. We've got a Nashville artist coming in. And so we're trying to set the pace down here in Tazewell so that we can give that support around the area, the region, and around the state. So again, appreciate you having me on and letting me just bloviate. Sometimes I make sense, sometimes I don't. But thank you for not taking too many shots at me today.
Well, listen, you get a cookie from Jim for mentioning the Lincoln Day dinner. So good job. You did your job.
Thank you. That's what I do as vice chairman. So
there you go. All right, we'll close this down. I'll do a double thanks to our producer, Lane Davis, because I realized after last week's episode, I forgot to thank him. So thank you, Lane. And to our viewers and watchers, thanks for being with us. We'll get you next week in the smoke-filled room, and hopefully what is a warm day where I can wear a short sleeve shirt and just show off how wide I am. Catch y'all later.